So, what exactly are these talks about? There are a lot of teachers, preachers, yogis, different types of gurus that people can go to for all different types of things regarding worldly existence and figuring things out in terms of what we see, what we experience. If you have questions about all manner of things, society, relationships, philosophy, different religions, more broad spirituality, all of these things are not a part of these talks. So these talks are primarily concerned with the ultimate question. Many words relate to this. You could say enlightenment, realization, freedom, truth, God. So many terms trying to walk around and describe the same thing. Obviously, none of them can actually describe it. Words are just symbols. And historically, describing that ultimate truth is done by negation. So you describe what it isn't because you cannot actually describe what it is. So ultimately, no matter how much talking is done, one question inevitably arises for people. It arose for myself as well. And that is the question, how? So we talk about realization, we talk about what the self is, we talk about what the small self, the ego, the individual is. We can have pointers to the nature of how we perceive our existence, our birth, before our birth, after our birth, our death. And we can go on, and we can cognitively and logically begin to have a framework. And that's important. That's not an unimportant thing. And almost everyone needs to start at that point. They need a base, they need a spiritual anchor, they need a framework, a conceptual framework. And there is no judgment, and there is no untruth in that path as a beginner. But eventually, as you go along the path, you'll start to see more paradoxes. You'll start to get frustrated. You will start to question things. Sometimes you might even lose faith or belief, either in your spiritual framework, your guru, your religion, whatever it might be. And as you go back and forth between all these different feelings, from an individual perspective, from a conceptual perspective, this question of how comes up. And often we find teachers, people who are speaking on spiritual matters, and they're describing worldly things, they're describing things that might benefit you in the world. Here, although I might indulge in that type of thing if it benefits the person where they are in their spiritual development, for the most part, I'm not concerned with that here. I'm only concerned with the ultimate freedom, the ultimate realization beyond all other things that puts you out of touch from suffering and ignorance and wandering, and perhaps you might say rebirth. And so, again, as a person's development indicates, I might engage with them on that level, but almost always I will not engage on that level. And so questions like the ultimate question of how, which always comes up, why, is another big one. How can I become free? How can I become realized? How do I experience it rather than just understand it? And I find in this case, comparing our condition to being in a dream is very helpful, because there are so many subtleties in these ideas that using a comparison to something like a dream makes it much more easily understandable. You'll also hear me talking about quantum physics and some of the theories in science, because I think a lot of people are open to that, and that language is accessible to many people, whereas some of the spiritual language can have different connotations, different meanings across cultures, and it can get confusing. So if you're dealing with the question of how, and we're using a comparison to a dream, you could spend eternity in a dream asking questions. You can ask how everything works. You can ask how to get free. You can ask why things happen, and you might get some really interesting and creative answers from wise people in your dream. You can continue these questions over and over. You may even find states of being in your dream that feel wonderful, that feel like you've achieved something, that you know something. But they're all part of the dream. You have not woken up. Nisargadatta Maharaj said, all ignorance, or all knowledge is ignorance. And I think for many people hearing that, they don't understand that, and they kind of are taken aback by that. How can all knowledge be simply ignorance? What he means by that is all your supposed knowledge is based on the dream. You could be the most intelligent, most informed, most incredible person in the dream, but you're still in the dream. You have not woken up. It's not reality. And although people insist that they are seekers and they are open to the truth and that they're honest and sincere in their seeking and they truly want freedom, in every case, when they finally realize, they will laugh at how they believed they were sincere. They believed they were trapped and not free. They believed they were suffering, because they were only sincere within the framework of the dream. They couldn't know what true sincere seeking is, that they were already free, that they were the dreamer, not the dream, and that they just hadn't woken up yet. Now, if you want to compare it to some of the ideas in quantum physics, you can compare it to the observer of an experiment just by observing, influencing the outcome of the experiment itself. In other words, you cannot separate yourself from what you're observing and be objective, because you are actually part of the dream. As you interact with it, you influence it. You as an individual identity cannot be separated from this reality that is actually a dream. And therefore, anything that you do within the scope of the dream is sheer ignorance. It is sheer illusion. All your knowledge, all your happiness, all your suffering are all unreal. Now, I don't mean that you don't experience them. What I mean is they have no ultimate reality. In other words, if you have a nightmare and you wake up from the nightmare, it's not that you didn't experience the nightmare, but it has no reality once you've woken up. Any understanding of what I'm saying right now is only a concept. It's only an idea within the dream. Even what I'm saying has to be thrown away. The concepts attached to what I'm saying need to be thrown away. The idea that you're listening to another person, sharing a concept together, understanding a concept, building a framework, and now you have knowledge and understanding, is all a lie. It's all an illusion. Again, it's not that I don't exist and you can't hear me talking. That's not the point. The point is it has no ultimate reality. And the more you interact with the dream, the more you perpetuate the dream. The more you observe the experiment, the more you affect the experiment. Once you realize that literally the seeker that you think you are, who you think is going to become enlightened, who you think will be realized, actually doesn't exist, has never been in a problem, never been in a place where they needed saving, other than the fact that you believe that that's true. And again, the question will come up. So how do I wake up from the dream? How do I realize that? Not from a understanding my words perspective, but how do I actually experience and transform into that thing that is realization and enlightenment? And the only thing that you can say is that there is no way. You can't stop doing everything and not try, nor can you continue to try and keep the dream going. Both the negation and the affirmation of action are the same thing. They're part of the dream. One of the easiest ways to conceptualize a way to get out of that double bind of not being able to act or stop action is the idea of grace. In that the Guru's grace, the grace of God, the grace of Buddha, whatever name that you would like to give it, it's the grace that has brought you to listen. It is the grace that will pull you out of the dream and into awakening, because you cannot do it. Until you realize that you're absolutely helpless to the point of you not being an actual thing that is sincerely seeking freedom, until you literally realize that, you cannot allow grace to pull you the rest of the way. You cannot realize truth. You cannot become enlightened. There is no such entity who will become enlightened, who is awake. When you really realize that, actually, first, when you begin to get a glimpse of something like that, it'll be shocking. It might even make you walk away from spirituality for a while. It could cause a dark night of the soul. It could cause depression. It could cause lack of motivation. All of these things I'm going to talk about in future videos because it's very necessary from what I see in people who talk about getting glimpses of awakening or realization. So the reason I wanted to bring all this up, and this is getting at some very subtle ideas for only, I think it's the 4th video, but you need to have an understanding of what is going to be talked about, what is going to occur here, because there won't be a series on relationships or here's how this can help your life, or here's how you can manifest X, Y, or Z based on the power of quantum perception. None of that will happen here. As I said in the beginning, I will not give you anything, nor will I ever ask you for anything. You have everything you need. I have everything I need. There is no thing that you or I could give one another. So if it's anything from a worldly perspective, in terms of how do I do this, or why is this happening, there are many, many places where you can go to get worldly knowledge and methods and how to put effort forth and what to do and how to get from point A to point B. In almost every case, this will not be the place for you. Now, having said that, there is no judgment here. There is no ridicule. There should never be any shame about where you are, what you're asking. That will never happen either. And as I said, if it's helpful to a person where they are in their spiritual journey, sometimes I will engage with a person on their level to see if that is helpful in getting them to a different place eventually. But especially when I'm just talking and I'm just continuing to lay this groundwork and this framework for what this is, there will be no advantage. It is only about, I'll use the word truth or self. It's singularly about that. And so I'll leave you with, if you insist on a how, then I would say the best methods are what past gurus have said, like Ramana Maharshi, which is kind of the dual path of devotion or self-inquiry, asking, who am I? And the reason why who am I is so effective is because, to put it in scientific terms, again, it's almost like the quantum field of potentiality, that realm of possibility looking back at itself. It basically collapses in on itself, and there is just total potential. No manifestation, no differentiation, just that underlying blank screen where everything has the potential to exist, that all the seeds are there, basically. Devotion, on the other hand, which I think many people find much easier, is really no different than self-inquiry if you go to the root, because eventually devotion leads to the extinguishing of the differentiation between the devotee and what you're devoted to. That line becomes blurred, becomes less visible until it eventually dissolves, and it really does dissolve into the who am I question eventually. All those differentiations between different paths and devotion and self-inquiry vanish, they disappear. So again, for these talks, this is not about the dream. This is not about exploring the dream, getting an advantage in the dream, asking how. If you come here, your idea of who you are will not be the same. It will not be the same. Your assumptions and the things that you think you know will be dissolved. And for some, that will be too much, and they won't be able to stay, and that's okay. For some, it will be the spark that they need to go further, to realize further. For some, it will be absolutely anxiety-inducing. For some, it could possibly be something that they almost literally run away from. And again, that's okay. That is absolutely okay. So until the next talk, those are some, even if you don't think those things are really that important, consider them further. There's power there. There is meaning and transformation there that might not be cognitively available, logically available, conceptually available when you listen to this video the first time, second time, whatever it might be. Even if you don't understand, just listen to the words and let what happens happen. All right, I will talk to you on the next video.